For Sunday, October 15th, you found the Georgia gang. Topping our agenda today, sentencing in the Atlanta City Hall corruption story. We're just 3 weeks away from the mayor's race in Atlanta and water wars between Georgia and Florida headed for the Supreme Court. Some of the stories up for grabs on the Georgia gang.
From the Fox 5 studios, the Georgia gang starts now.
And we're glad you could be with us on this Sunday. We're 3 weeks and change away from the Atlanta mayor's race. I want to make a proclamation at the top of the broadcast. I am declaring your next 30 minutes a Weinstein-free zone. We will not discuss Harvey Weinstein. Any objections?
You just did.
Any objections?
You're talking about the Democrat pervert?
The Democrat pervert. We're not going there.
Okay.
We're not going to do that. But what we are going to talk about is corruption at Atlanta City Hall. We learned a little bit more this week with the two contractors who've been in the news for some time now, both sentenced, one for 27 months, and then E.R. Mitchell, who appears to be the main cog, sentenced to 5 years, but he's still talking, and that sentence could be reduced. Phil, it was my impression that E.R. Mitchell is the only one who seems to know who got the money, the more than $1 million at City Hall.
Well, that is one theory, and then of course you have Adam Smith, the procurement officer, who pled guilty to taking bribes in this expanding federal investigation. But I thought the quote of the week was from Assistant U.S. Attorney Jeff Davis, and he said, "Corruption in Atlanta is prolific." And of course, anyone who's followed this should know that by now. And I think you're going to see more shoes to drop, maybe before the mayoral election.
Well, as I said, the mayor's election is only 3 weeks away. Peter, I doubt it that Adam Smith will be sentenced. He's pleaded, but I doubt he'll be sentenced in time for the mayor's race, perhaps the runoff, who knows. I'm trying to gauge the impact of it on the mayor's race, which we're going to talk about in some detail. But I've noticed that really on television anyway, it's only Peter Amon who is attacking corruption, and he's talking about how he got some guy off the hook at the watershed department. You're kind of missing the point in my mind. Is anybody else talking about it? You've been to the forums.
Well, they all are. Ethics has been a big issue this past week.
They're not talking about the scandal. They're talking about ethics and transparency.
Well, yeah. If you look at the debates with the Atlanta Press Club, they're talking about it, Dick. In fact, the impact is going to be tremendous on this race, and it's I think it's going to get even more. The fur is really going to fly over the next 2 or 3 weeks.
Darren Johnson, welcome to the broadcast. Glad you're here because you are the guru of these kinds of races, and I guess what I'm trying to get at is who's making a big deal out of it? Is it Cesar Mitchell? Keisha Lance Bottoms can't because she got Kasim Reed's endorsement this week.
Well, Cesar was the first person who kind of raised it, and we saw what happened there. I mean, he went out, called for this moratorium. He sort of implied and inferred that because of the corruption and the recent investigation that we should put a pause on contracts. Mayor Reed came back pretty forcefully and said, no, we're not going to do that. So now you have Peter Amon, a white man, business guy, running for mayor, who did, by the way, when he was there, and City Hall was very tough on ethics. But one of the things that I think that he leaves out in his commercial is a lot of those people who he quote unquote fired. A lot of these folks who committed this crime were people who the Reed administration kind of inherited from previous administration. I want to be clear, these are not people that necessarily Mayor Franklin put there, but he did do that. But I think the commercial is really to motivate white people. Let's just call it what it is. He wants to show a lot of the white voters in the city because we know that there's an enthusiasm gap. So he's trying to placate to that particular community. But one of the things that he's got to be careful is that it kind of gives the sense that you're saying, I want to lock up African Americans. You know, I want to lock up these hardworking city employees who a lot of them are African Americans who are committing this corruption. So again, I think Peter has decided that he's going to go that route. I'm not sure how it would affect the race, but that's pretty much what it is.
He did sign some of the contracts in question.
Yeah, let me ask Theron this. You said Peter Amon was pretty good on ethics. You know, the procurement officer, Adam Smith, reported to Peter Amon when he was COO. Right. And I remember very clearly, and so do all of us, when all of those airport bids were thrown out a while back. Companies spent millions of dollars on these bids. And they were thrown out, let me finish, and they were thrown out. Don't you think Amon would have asked about this? I think it's an ethical problem for him.
In fairness, I don't know that Peter Amon necessarily knew what he was doing in the bathroom. I mean, the guy said he was going in the bathroom and getting $1,000 in cash, right?
The guy, you mean Adam Smith.
I'm talking about Adam Smith, not Peter Amon.
I'm sure Peter goes to the bathroom too.
Adam Smith, right, I'm sure that he does.
But he
probably doesn't do that in the bathroom. And so,
you know,
the fact of the matter is that you can have some rogue employees and not know Exactly right. I don't think that they're going to go around publicizing the criminality.
Right? I would ask questions.
Well, he also says he stepped away from it.
I would ask, if the procurement officer reports to you and you have airport bids thrown out just because they don't like them, that's outrageous.
Well, Phil, let's be fair here. All right, now again,
I am being fair.
No,
that happened. That is a fact.
You have been clear for the last 3 weeks that you want to sort of, you're hitting Peter a little bit. You're trying to say that he was responsible for some of the corruption and bribery that was going on at City Hall.
Don't you agree with that?
I think that's fair, but I think to Jeff's point, if a person at Insider Advantage was committing a crime or doing something unbeknownst to you, should we come on the show and just criticize you if that person did not tell you? You did not know that this person.
I would like to think I know about it.
But I don't think that your employer is going to tell you.
Well, I tell you what, I've only got about 6, so I think I can monitor that a lot better.
But to your point, I do think, and I will say this, I think that if you look at recent polling, there is an enthusiasm amongst white voters. I mean, even in the poll that I'm sure we're going to get into, 25% of white voters are actually, 25% of African American voters are voting for one of the white candidates. And so I think what Peter has decided is that he wants to try to placate to a crowd of people that he thinks that will respond to his sort of strong corruption ad.
Let's set the stage. We've had dueling polls. We've had some polls that we thought changed but didn't. But what we basically have in the last week or so is Mary Norwood coming back to the pack. She's not near 30, she's near to 20%. Keisha Bottoms separating herself from the rest of the pack, moving into what? The mid-teens?
Firmly into second place at 19.
And I think you're talking about the landmark poll from last week.
Right.
Just to be clear.
Right, but just without getting into the numbers, you've got Mary Norwood here and you've got Keisha Lance Bottoms here.
Within the margin of error.
And then you've got this pack that isn't moving.
And 17% undecided. I thought that was interesting.
It's still very high undecideds in the race. Most of them among African Americans, probably because there are so many African American voters. But so many African American candidates, rather, that it's hard for them to decide. But I think that if they break proportionately, that is going to benefit Keisha Lance Bottoms, right? Because she's getting 1/3 of the African American vote already. If she gets 1/3 of those who are undecided, I think that
Or, as you pointed out, though, Jeff, it could break more to Mary Norwood, the front runner, because she does very well in the African American community.
She is actually polling second among African Americans.
I want to point out about Mary Norwood that while you watch these polls jump around a little bit, you see Keisha Lance Bottoms jump up closer to the margin of error, as you said. Mary Norwood has not yet been on television. The only people on TV that I see are a very effective commercial for Keisha Lance Bottoms, which I think has moved her, and Peter Amon's commercials, which are not so effective. And there are others that have the money to go on TV, but I think those polling numbers will change like that when Mary Norwood starts her television. Because in a sense, she's got to remind people she's still in the race.
Well, one of the things that the Keisha Lance Bottoms was able to do is that she outraised all of the people in the race this last quarter. I mean, she raised the most money. And so when Mary goes on TV, I presume this week, Keisha will have enough money to basically, number one, continue to promote her message, but also respond to any attack that's going to come her way.
Isn't that because she now was endorsed by America Seem Read and she's getting all that Read machine money?
Well, I don't know anything about a Read machine.
Sure,
but I do.
The fact of the matter is that this bounce, this huge bounce for Keisha Lance Bottoms came out prior to that endorsement, and I can tell you that endorsement means a lot. It means a lot. We have seen presidential candidates issue endorsements in this race, and with Bernie Sanders.
We knew the mayor was for her from day one.
A former mayor and UN ambassador, Andy Young, and I think that the endorsement that's going to count more than anyone is from Kasim Reed.
We got to get out. Time's a wasting here. I'm going to prolong this discussion. A couple of things I think we ought to get to. So when we return, more on the mayor's race and the rest of the major news, including water wars. Stay with us.
Have a question or comment for the Georgia Gang? Visit their website at fox5atlanta.com.
My pal Phil over here got rabbit ears and said that I accused them of wasting time. What I meant was we went over long on the mayor's race. And guess what? I'm going to stay. I'm going to stay on it. Okay. Now, who in the rest of the pack in the race for mayor of Atlanta? Who in the rest of the pack? We've discussed Mary Norwood and Keisha Lance Bottoms and Peter Amon. Does anyone else have a chance of separating? They've all raised a good bit of money. Is it Vincent Ford? I thought he would. He's not.
He's at the bottom.
Is it Kathy Woolard? Is it Cesar Mitchell? Yeah. Each of you give me somebody else who could push the top two. How about you, Jeff?
I don't. We've been looking for some consolidation in this race all this time. It has not happened. I don't think that it's likely to happen in the last 3 weeks. I think that these candidates are going to stay in, and I really don't expect for them to do much better than where they are right now.
They've all got enough money to stay in.
You've got 3 horses in the race, and we've talked about those 3.
Jeff, Phil, what do you think?
I think that Cesar Mitchell has dropped, but I don't think he's dropped that much. He still has some broad-based support, so I would still keep an eye on him in this fluid situation.
Darren, who bounces up?
I think
with
it's 2
some luck?
people. I think you still can't count Kwanzaa Hall out. I mean, even though he's low in the polls, he still represents a lot of neighborhoods in the city. And quite frankly, it's not so much about how much money you raise, it's how do you spend your money in the last few weeks. And also, I think Kathy Wheeler has been doing very well in the debates recently. I mean, if you look at the last 3 that I've been a part of, she's been very concise, she's been very good. But look, let me just tell you, somebody who was in this exact moment 8 years ago, this race is far from over. It's going to be a lot of unforced errors. It's going to be some October surprises that we don't even know about right now.
Right.
And so particularly with Keisha and Mary, they now got to start thinking about consolidation, because if and when they make it to the runoff, they've got to figure out how they can bring everyone together to try to win in November.
All right, enough of that.
December.
That's our first really good extended discussion on the mayor's race. I'm glad we did that. And I don't think we wasted anyone's time, right?
Good.
Yeah, that's good. All right. But there is more important news when you think about things. Really, in the overall scheme of things, we try to point this out all the time. The ongoing water wars between Georgia and Florida are critical to the economic development of this state. And Phil, we finally got word that the case will go to the U.S. Supreme Court. The Supreme Court had put it aside and sent it to a special master. The special master ruled for Georgia, and now it goes to the High Court.
That's right. And as we've said, Georgia has an excellent case against Florida, and we certainly don't want water cap that would be devastating to the economy of Georgia. And so I think all of us should be feeling very good about us going to the U.S. Supreme Court.
Well, you know, the special master has given the justices some guidance on this issue, saying that they think that Georgia is in the right here, and that makes a huge difference. The other thing that makes a huge difference, of course, are the water conservation efforts that are taking place in Georgia.
Governor Deal made a big deal out of that this week. And I think Governor Deal made a good case in praising Gwinnett County for their recycling efforts.
Yeah, and I mean, listen, this whole water wars thing has been going on for too long. I mean, you got to commend the governor. I mean, we as taxpayers have spent a lot of money, you know, with this war that clearly shows that there's no compromise. And so, big win for the governor, big win for Georgia that now the Supreme Court is going to hear this case. All
right, another national issue that affects a major local company. Interesting fight. Delta Airlines wants to buy a bunch of jets from Bombardier of Canada, and all of a sudden the Trump administration stepped in and said, we're going to slap some heavy tariffs on the purchase of those jets and making them as expensive as if you bought from Boeing. Phil, what do you think?
Well, President Trump has always said that we're getting shortchanged on a lot of these trade deals, and he's right. And so he's the negotiator. I think that you're seeing Delta trying to walk right down the middle here in terms of this negotiation and back and forth.
I thought
this is the president once again injecting himself into something that he doesn't have any business in at all. Conservatives are supposed to believe in free trade. This shows clearly free trade. Free trade.
I'm a free trader.
Free trade. You're a free trader, aren't you?
You ought to be a fair
trader.
There
you go.
I'm more of a free trader.
Right. No, a free trader.
We're getting
and
this is
the opposite of free trade. This is the opposite of conservatism.
Okay, that's enough
and what
on
the
this.
Republican Party has stood for decades.
But the point is, what's interesting is Bombardier of Canada makes these planes that seat about 100 people. Boeing, the complainant in all this, doesn't make that size plane. They've gone to the bigger planes. So I don't really know what the fuss is about. Turning back to the state, in the governor's race, it's way too early, like I said about the mayor's race a year ago. But there's a poll out by Casey Cagle's people showing him at 41%. Hello, John Oxendine.
Well, who did the poll? Who did the poll?
McLaughlin.
Yes. How bad is McLaughlin in doing Georgia? They're terrible. They said Jack Kingston was going to win, you remember, in 2014 over Purdue.
They said Eric Cantor was going to win.
They said Eric Cantor. They were off by 30 points. You know, and I think Casey Cagle is clearly the front runner, don't get me wrong. But if I were Casey Cagle, I'd get a new pollster.
What about the forums this week? Is this really a race to the right?
It is. You know, I was in Milledgeville last weekend, and one of the questioners of the 5 GOP candidates, and I like to call it just some common sense, traditional Georgia values that the 5 explained. I'll just go real quick. They addressed rural health care. I thought Cagle and Brian Kemp did the best job in talking about telemedicine and trying to reach out. On illegal immigration, a smile came to my face because they were all opposed to in-state tuition for illegal aliens. They're opposed to sanctuary cities, which Atlanta is kind of teetering on. I was surprised that nobody supported the cultivation of the cannabis oil in the state. That kind of surprised me. And education.
Because they're conservatives, Phil.
Yeah, I know it, but you know what? When it comes to treating, and I'm a conservative, I think you might agree.
Shocking.
I actually think that we do have to expand the number of diseases that can be treated by the cannabis oil. And on education, that was another big topic. So I think Cagle's the front runner, but like you say, it's wide open.
And the Democrats didn't make much noise this week, so we won't talk about them. We've got to get out. When we come back, we will turn to, oh Lord, bathrooms for transgenders. Yes, it's upon us. Stay with us.
Have a question or comment for the Georgia Gang? Visit their website at fox5atlanta.com.
If you question the wisdom of all those Republican candidates for governor running to the right, look no farther for a reason than the city of Decatur. This week, packed house in Decatur for a school board session. The school system has implemented a policy, I guess from kindergarten all the way through 12th grade, that if a child identifies as another gender, he, she, it can be allowed to use the gender bathroom that it claims to represent.
Locker rooms, sports teams.
Yeah, this is the Obama policy on steroids.
Well, yeah, if you just wake up one day and you think you're the opposite sex, it's okay there.
But you're right.
It's incredible.
But let me emphasize your point. Locker rooms.
Hey guys,
used to be bathrooms, locker rooms, sports teams.
We got to stop. I got to jump in here. We got to stop stigmatizing this issue. If a young man or a boy identifies themselves as a boy, they're a boy. If a girl identifies herself as a girl, she's a girl. Mm-hmm. And so this whole conversation that we're having is very discriminatory. I mean, the point that a person goes through this transgender experience, when they want to come out and basically say that I want to be a transgender citizen, it's a very traumatic experience. They get bullied, they get picked on, and they're not accepted. And so I think that in Georgia in 2017, we are really focusing on an issue that, quite frankly, should be looked at from a different lens.
Are you suggesting that these two become more compassionate, empathetic?
Exactly.
Well, that's absurd. I would agree. I would agree with what you said. No, that's a cheap shot. That's a cheap shot. And I'm going to respond because
let me finish
everybody's compassionate.
No,
you talk about transgenders. I don't disagree with what you just said.
Okay.
But, however, you have to have some common sense policies with regard to people who maybe really aren't transgender. What's happening now is people are now deciding one way, and then a couple years later they're deciding back.
But let's do 8-year-olds and 9-year-olds.
I'm talking about privacy.
But let's go.
You're forgetting privacy.
Let's go to the capital.
And you're forgetting privacy.
Let's go to the business aspect of this, because I know
you don't want to address what I just said.
No, I think you're wrong. I think that, and to Dick's point, I think that if a young person who wants to identify themselves as a boy, they should be able to do so. And the same should go for a girl. But let's talk about the business impact of this. Let's not forget, let's saw what happened to North Carolina. And Phil and Dick, you guys are big conservatives and big capitalists, and you always want to identify Georgia as the best place to do business. If we continue to fall down this slippery slope, getting into public debates about whether people should or should not be accepted because of their choice.
You can forget about Amazon.
You can forget about Amazon. You can forget about the Super Bowl. You can forget about it all.
We can all figure out, whether you're liberal or conservative, some common sense policies for our young children. And
absolutely.
That's all we're talking about is some common sense.
You can have a unisex bathroom, for crying out loud, to accommodate the needs of the
disturbed.
You've got a lot of disturbed kids starting in the unisex bathroom.
Politically correct.
There's family bathrooms now. There are men, women, and family.
But the policy indicator goes so far beyond that.
That's right. That's what Dick is trying to point out.
This goes to locker rooms. It goes to sports teams. All right, enough of that. I don't think the Decatur School Board is going to rescind the policy, from what I can tell. There's some pretty good stuff being written about this issue in a temperate way, and And Theron approached it fairly temperately too, even though I disagree with it totally.
Sensible. I'm a sensible
I think
Democrat.
he's too politically correct.
Which
Common
leads us-
sense.
How am I politically correct? Because I make a factual, intelligent argument.
We're for
Phil.
common sense.
I know you're not used to
And
many
we're
people.
for the kids. We're for the kids
Well,
and
be
privacy
for them all.
and
All right.
privacy.
Be for them all,
All right,
not just a few.
the story of Decatur schools leads right back to DeKalb, where it always does, where, Jeff, at Lithonia Middle School, kids are getting what are they, 6th graders?
Yeah, they're 6th graders getting gender quizzes.
Yeah, and do we really need to do that for 6th graders?
And parents are upset.
You know,
You like that?
I haven't seen the gender quiz. I don't know what's in the gender quiz.
I'll
I don't
give you
know
2
that it's a
questions to
good-
see if you
Yeah,
can
we
answer.
should study
yeah,
that.
okay.
All
Give
right,
me
here's
2
one
questions.
question. A boy who likes other boys is a,
Is a boy.
well, you're supposed to say gay. And a girl,
Flunk, yeah. And a girl.
and a girl who likes other girls is
Is a girl.
no, she's a lesbian according to the Lithonia Middle School.
All right, okay.
And we're doing this in 6th
Do
grade.
we want
and
this
it's
in the 6th
ridiculous.
grade? And a lot of parents are pulling their kids out. It's
Phil and Dick,
disruptive.
that is where
It's
we are in
disruptive.
2017,
Well,
guys. I know you
we can
live.
come to a common
you were
sense.
born in a different
Well,
age,
you can take
in a
cheap
different
shots
decade.
all
no,
you
I'm
want.
not taking
We're
cheap
for-
shots.
we're for
I'm the
traditional-
youngest person on this panel. I am the person who's closer to these
listen.
children. No, I'm saying
This is so
I think
sanctimonious.
No, it's not sanctimonious. It's factual. It's that you are discriminating. You are discriminating against a sector of people who are going through a traumatic.
We're talking about a
experience.
test that 6th graders don't fully understand. Now, how about that? Let's address the
All right,
issue.
all right, I
here.
got my last question. When you were playing basketball at Cedar Shoals High School,
No, football at Clark Central
football
High School.
at Clark Central, well, I was 0 for 2 on that. I'm
That's okay.
sorry, and I know the answer.
I don't support Cedar Shores.
All right, when the girl walked into the locker room and said she wanted to strap on the pads and walk around that locker room, what would your reaction
That
have
would
been?
have, first of all, in those years, if a woman, a girl, wanted to play football, then she would go through the process. That would never happen, Dick. And if she did walk into the locker room that time, my teammates, because we were all people who were inclusive, we would have said, hey, listen, there's a process that you go to try out on a team. We would love for you to go through that process. And if she made the team and could contribute, of course we would accept her.
All right, we
As a
got to get
matter
out.
of note, I mean, the Boy Scouts did accept girls this week.
Well, we
Exactly.
didn't even get to
And you
that.
let-
Again, 2017,
you know,
guys. It's a new,
the
I like
liberals
new
now are
age.
gender benders. Yeah, y'all are gender
All right, we got to
benders.
get out, so we'll have some time for winners and losers, and we'll return and do just that.
Time now for the week's winners and losers.
And we'll do that right now. And don't forget us on Facebook. And remember, we have our own channel on YouTube, the Georgia Gang on YouTube. Jeffrey.
Very good, thank you. City of Atlanta for decriminalizing marijuana. There were far too many young kids going to jail for no good reason. The mayor actually did sign that legislation.
Yep.
He did not veto it.
What a silly
and
thing
just,
that was. Yeah.
Wasn't that silly?
Yeah,
And then you had news organizations reporting a tweet as fact.
on my
Anyway,
phone,
I'm not going to
yeah.
go there. I'm not going to go there. Keith Parker is a winner. Just finished his last day and his last weekend because of the APTA conference. Now going over to Goodwill Industries. He's our winner. He did a great job at MARTA. E.R. Mitchell is the loser. Not so much for the 5 years that he got for going to jail, but because it is unprecedented ever for anyone to be convicted of trying to commit a bribe. You either commit a bribe or you don't commit a bribe. But this guy's going to jail for trying to commit a bribe, for conspiracy to commit a bribe.
All right. Darren, you ready to go?
I am. Congressman John Lewis, you took a little shot at him last week, so let me make him my winner this week. He celebrated this weekend 30 years of service, had a fantastic event at the Gathering Spot. It had like a few hundred people there, so I want to definitely make him a winner. And Jamel Hill, a young woman who basically sent out a tweet criticizing the NFL, particularly focusing on Jerry Jones. I want to commend her. There's a massive movement in
She
supporting
called
her.
for a boycott of advertisers. That's a slippery slope when you're on a broadcasting outfit like ESPN. You could boycott their advertisers too, you know.
The other person is Daniel Halpern, who this week was named as the DNC Deputy Finance Chair.
Which Indian tribe is he part of? Is he?
Isn't he an airport vendor?
And then the last person, my loser, is Jerry Jones. And I'm going to make a lot of my
Really?
friends mad, particularly a leader in the cab, when I say that Jerry Jones is my loser this week. How dare you kneel and then become the biggest hypocrite. Because you get threatened for a tax credit, you want to now demand that your players stand. He has tarnished the star for the Dallas Cowboys, so every single Cowboy fan should be outraged by
The
Daniel
NFL
Jones.
has lost the support of the nation. Phil, go ahead.
Well, my losers are those Kennesaw State University cheerleaders who don't respect the anthem and the flag. And
not about the flag.
my loser, though, is also mayoral candidate Peter Amon. We talked about that in an earlier
We're beating
segment.
that guy.
He, well, let me tell you
What do you
why.
got against Peter,
Let me
man?
tell you why. He
Did you have a
accused.
bad
He
deal at
accused.
Maine or
He
something?
accused. You don't like this. He accused Mary Norwood of being unethical, and that's the cheapest shot. And I noticed he dropped that storyline. And then Evander Holyfield, the great boxer, is my winner. On October 19th, Thursday night at the Freight Depot. He's going to be there, 55th birthday. We're going to celebrate that. He's also got an anti-gang initiative. He's mentoring young fighters. It's going to be a championship fight, so he's my winner.
All right, we got to get out. Last word from me. My loser is the Decatur school superintendent. His name is Dr. David Dude. Dude, man. Dr. David Dude. That policy is just ridiculous and extreme. You know, sometimes we're lucky. Here in Atlanta, I was just watching some sports and I thought, we got some homegrown guys we ought to praise. Ernie Johnson Jr. on Major League Baseball, Brad Nessler now on big-time college football. Two local guys who have done well. Hey, they're my winners. See you next week on the Georgia Gang.
The opinions expressed in this broadcast are those of the panelists appearing in this program